This is a Sports Catastrophe production.
Hey there, ho there, it's Jeff Cardano. Welcome you to another Sports Catastrophe on this day. And on this day, July the 19th, 2009, one of the most unbelievable final rounds in British Open history happened. At Turnberry in Scotland, it was a battle royal between Stuart Sink and Tom Watson in a 4-hole playoff. And you'd be thinking, well, that's nothing exciting. Well, what if I told you that Tom Watson had a chance to win his 6th British Open? He was a 5-time champion, and he was 59 years old, trying to be the oldest major champion in history. This was only the 4th Open at Turnberry. Tom Watson won the 1977 event, Greg Norman in 1986, and Nick Price in 1994. So anyway, this was huge and all that. In the 15 years after the title was last held at Turnberry, it was lengthened by over 250 yards, adding more than 60 yards to a par 5 17th hole called Lang Wine at 5:59. Of course, these 18 holes were actually named after famous Scottish phrases. Alyssa Craig, Maxacar, Blawweary, Wobito, Finmi Oot, Tapitori, Rune the Ben, Goldfell, Bruce's Castle, Dina Felter, Maidens, Monument, Tickly Tap, Risk and Hope, Kakani, Weeburn, Lang Wang, and Duel in the Sun. Regardless, there was a lot of things going on. To qualify for the British Open, you had to be in the top 10 and ties for the 2008 British Open, which was Robert Allenby, Stephen Ames, Paul Casey, Ben Curtis, Ernie Els, Jim Furyk, Patrick Harrington, David Howell, Anthony Kim, Greg Norman, and Ian Poulter. Henrik Stenson, Steve Stricker, and Chris Wood. Robert Carlson had to withdraw because of an eye problem. They had passed Open champions point between 43 and 48. So they wanted the 65 rule, but Tony Jacklin and Johnny Miller both were eligible but didn't compete. Past British Open champions 60 or under, and many of them: Marco Kofecchia, John Daly, Dave Duvall, Nick Faldo, Todd Hamilton, Paul Worry, Tom Lehman, Justin Leonard, Sadie Lyle, Mark O'Meara, Tom Watson, Tiger Woods would do all that. Ian Baker, Finch, Seve, Biasels, Nick Price, and Bill Rogers were actually eligible, but they did not compete. You had to have won the British Open the past 10 years, be part of the top 50 on the World Golf Rankings for the top 21. You had to be top 30 in the PGA European Tour Order of Merit. Win the U.S. Open from 2005 to 2009, U.S. Masters winners from 05 to 09, PGA champions from 04 to 08. And yeah, a lot of people going on and whatever. So anyway, yeah, there was a lot of qualifying. Matt Kuchar and Davis Love III had to go through qualifying. So there were some alternates. Matthew Goggin replaced Trevor Immelman. Ben Crane replaced Phil Mickelson, who had to take off the tournament because of his wife's breast cancer surgery. Steve Marino replaced Shingo Katayama. Rod Pampling was in. Thomas LeVay replaced Brett Quigley, and John Senden replaced Chief Singh. So the first round, calm and sunny weather happened, and a 64 by Miguel Angel Jimenez happened. He was at -6. Tom Watson was tied for second with Ben Curtis and Kenichi Kuboya. Tom Watson, who was the 5-time British Open champion at age 59, had a bogey-free 65. Mark Calcavecchia and Mark O'Meara shot 67 each. Calcavecchia was 49, O'Meara was 52. Anyway, Greg Norman, who was a Cinderella story last year, shot a 77, which was disappointing. Mike Weir of Canada was actually at 300 par. In the second round, high winds and scattered showers made the scoring very hard. But Watson was tied for first with Steve Marino at -5, no relation to Dan, with Mark Calcavecchia at 4 under par. There were only 2 amateurs who qualified and all that. Matteo Manassero, the British amateur champion, won. It was the only one of the amateurs. Gross was the other amateur, but anyway, Manassero won the silver medal as the leading amateur because they do all that. 73 people advanced to the weekend. Tiger Woods missed the cut by a stroke, which was huge. It was the first time he missed a British Open cut in ever, and only the second time as a pro after the 2006 US Open. Mike Weir had a shitty 78 in the second round. He faltered. Ben Curtis, after his 65, had an 80 and was out. David Duval had a couple of bad rounds, and so was Jeff Ogilvie. In the third round, Tom Watson did shoot one over, but he still leads by a stroke over the Aussie Matthew Goggin and the Brit Ross Fisher. Bryce Mulder had a 67 shot round of the day, round 3, putting him in a tie for 8th. So Watson led Fisher and Goggin by a stroke. Fisher birdied the first 2 holes to take the lead, and Watson had 2 bogeys in 3 holes, so it looked good. Fisher had a chance to win as an Englishman. Unfortunately, he had a terrible shot, including a snowman, or an 8 if you will, on the 5th hole, which was a quadruple bogey. Matthew Goggin tried. He was actually tied for the lead with 5 holes left, but 3 straight bogeys ruined him. Chris Wood was 1 stroke behind the lead. He was 4 under par through the first 17 holes, but he made a mistake and bogeyed to go to 1 under par. Lee Westwood had to have a 3-putt on 18, dropped him to 1 under par. And Stuart Sink had the lead of the clubhouse at -2 with a 66, 72, 71, 69. Well, Sink got a 15-foot putt on the 18th. Watson actually birdied 17. And all Tom Watson had to do was get par on 18, and it was over. Tom Watson would have won his 6th British Open, and at 59 would have obliterated the record for oldest player to win a major, which at that time was set by Julius Borles, who was 48 at the 1968 US Open. Unfortunately, he had a bad approach shot, which took a hard bounce and rolled over the green. Watson could not get up and down cleanly and missed his par putt, which meant that he would face Stuart Sink in a traditional 4-hole playoff. That's what happens in the British Open. So Watson looked decent and all that. They were in the playoff. Just to let you know that England's Lee Westwood and Chris Wood both tied for 3rd, tied for 5th were England's Luke Donald, Australia's Mark Goggin, and South Africa's Retief Goosen, Thomas Aiken of South Africa, Ernie Els of South Africa, Soren Hansen of Denmark, Richard Johnson of Sweden, and Justin Leonard of the US, all tied for 8th. Manassero was only 1 stroke behind the top 10. So it was a 4-hole playoff over 5, 6, 7, and 8. Unfortunately, Tom Watson had nothing. He was not really that huge. A 7 on the 3rd playoff hole sunk him, and Stuart Sink easily won, beating Watson by 6 strokes. Sink went par, par, birdie, birdie. Watson went bogey, par, double bogey, bogey. So it was just easy to see. But man, it would have been amazing if Tom Watson at 59 would have pulled off a great British Open championship, but it wasn't meant to be. Of course, Borles' record is now broken by Phil Mickelson, who was 50 when he won the PGA Championship a couple years ago. So records are made to be broken, I suppose. Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do.